Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day so far.
Hey Joe, welcome.
Thanks, mate. Nice to hear from you. And yeah, how are you doing?
Doing well, man. We're gonna get started here in just a few minutes. I want to wait for. I think we have one more panelist that's joining on time, and then we have a couple guys that are gonna trickle in a bit later. But we can certainly get the conversation started here in about 1 or 2 minutes.
Nice one, cool. I accidentally joined the Google Meet, so glad I found the Twitter space.
No worries, man. I usually follow up when I open it because sometimes people get confused. And I do need to figure out a way to play music in here when we're getting warmed up. I know some other broadcasters do that.
I think you just play it through your mic.
Or just sing.
Yeah, I gotta.
Give us a
Or we
rap,
can sing, or we can do a chorus. Okay, so I think we have we have 4 out of the 6, and I know that we're going to be Andrew and who is it? Yeah, Andrew and Dan. Dan's going to be joining a bit late, so let's go ahead and get started here. I know we have active recording, the broadcast. Good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are, Whale Coin Talk community. My name is Noah. I'm here with our beloved panelists. Some of them you've already met before. Some are new to the Aquarium. But without further ado, let's get started. I titled this one Pillars of Adoption, the Next Big Catalysts. And I've been thinking about this quite deeply myself over the last few weeks. I saw DeFi coming in 2020. It was kind of a slow buildup. But for me, NFTs, and this is my own anecdotal experience, NFTs kind of came out of nowhere. And they really took the industry by storm, not just with PFPs and collectibles, but even with the rise of Web3 gaming and especially upon Facebook's shift towards the name Meta, there was the metaverse hype that ties into that as well. But these were some industry catalysts, in my opinion, that led to a lot of attention and a lot of eyes being shifted towards our industry. You can point to global macro conditions like all the money printing that was happening in 2020 and 2021. But I've been pondering what the next big catalyst is. And I have a few different thoughts in my head. Feel free to raise your hand at any point or just cut me off if I'm talking too much or if you have something to add. I try to keep these things pretty relaxed. But I think that the raising hand, a combination of raising hand or just like speaking up when you have something to say works best. One of the things that I've been, and I'm going to start with this, one of the things that I have been thinking about is kind of the evolution. There's going to be a few catalysts. Like one is the evolution of NFTs and Web3 gaming. And me being a gamer my entire life, I just understand the value of Web3 gaming. First and foremost, the video game has to be very good. The cherry on top, icing on the cake, is asset ownership within that ecosystem. So that is one of the evolution of that, right? When really good studios like let's say Activision or Epic Games start to make moves and actually build legitimate video games on the blockchain, that's when the true power of Web3 gaming will be seen. But I'm gonna uncue my mic here. If anyone has anything to say to that, there are certainly other points that I wanted to touch upon as well. One being the integration of crypto into Web 2 and legacy ecosystems, the rise of layer 2s, and even something that none of us see us coming, right? Something that might take us by storm, similar to how NFTs did for me. But if anyone has anything to say upon that or anything to add, go for it. Let's get the show on the road.
Sure. I'll shoot now. Just to bounce off what you were saying about payments there, and forgive me as this is going to sound very 2011, 2012 of me, but I still don't think that payments and Bitcoin/crypto is priced in, and that will be the next pillar of adoption. You mentioned gaming there, and of course, people talk a lot about Web3 and blockchain games, which I'm not a huge fan of. I think they're never going to scale up to be a proper, fun game to play. But what you are seeing is the integration of payments into established games, such as, I'm sure you've all played Counter-Strike or you're familiar with Counter-Strike, but now you can play CSGO and stream sats over the Lightning Network, the Bitcoin Layer 2 Lightning Network, and effectively be paid and rewarded for your, for getting headshots or getting kill streaks or whatever it may be. And I think that people in the crypto industry haven't really understood the implications of what it means to have this peer-to-peer network built on top of Bitcoin. So yeah, I think that I was sort of trying to follow off what you were saying there with payments. And essentially, a lot of people are sleeping on the Lightning Network. A lot of people don't realize that this thing works, and it works near instantly, frictionlessly, and the implications of that in the gaming space, where, I mean, you see a lot of these esports competitions, right, where the winners are based in South Korea or America or Europe, and even getting the payments in terms of the remittance for their prize money, getting that sent around the world is near impossible currently. And again, the Bitcoin and Lightning Network fixes that issue. So that's just wanted to say on that.
So Joe, are you not bullish Web3 gaming as a whole? Like, do you not foresee, let's say, and I always make this reference, an MMO like World of Warcraft or a game like Fortnite being fully Web3 and blockchain compatible, where again the games are very good, but you have that layer of asset ownership on top?
I mean, there's two different things there, right? There's the idea of building a blockchain game, and I mean, I used to work at that Radar, which it's a company that's super bullish on all things Web3, tokenize everything. Let's build in the metaverse. I mean, we even used to host meetings, our weekly meetings in the metaverse in Decentraland, and it made me so bearish on the space. I couldn't get over how crap everything was. If you want to build a game, you're not looking for a blockchain first. You're looking for how you're going to code it up. And as we know, blockchains are slow, they're clunky, they don't scale well. So yeah, the first thing is, will there be a massive MMO built on a blockchain? I really doubt it, or at least I doubt it in our lifetime. And even if it were built, why would you even build on a blockchain anyway? What I think you are going to see is the integration of blockchain technologies, i.e. Bitcoin, into these spaces so that you can sort out the payments infrastructure. I mean, I understand the need for asset ownership, whether you need your skins on Call of Duty or you need to show off your trophies on whatever racing game you're on. But why in your right mind would you build a game on a blockchain? And I'm generally sort of throwing that question to the floor. What is the advantage of building a game on a blockchain as opposed to building it normally and then implementing some sort of add-on?
So yeah. I'm gonna go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
No, I'm just inclined to agree. These gaming systems are entrenched and have fan bases, and the most of people that are playing these games don't care whether they own their NFTs or whatever. They're already spending $50 billion a year on in-game purchases, and they don't give a what about the blockchain generally. So I think so often the blockchain is in fact a solution in search of a problem. When we talk about adoption, we're kind of talking about what systems must capitulate to Web3, whether they like it or not. And I don't think gaming is one of those. I think they've got a fan base that's established and is content to fork over billions, whether it's on a blockchain or not.
I think that I would tend to kind of just, I mean, I'm not disagreeing completely, but I am a little bit. When you look at things like Roblox and things like that, people, or something like Second Life or Fortnite, where people, it's kind of mimicking reality or a second form of life for a lot of people. In these games, like there's in-game economies, and in-game economies, you need transparency. And I'm not saying that everything has to be done on blockchain, every single transaction, because that would be ridiculous, especially with a massively adopted game. But if there's transparency in monetary and fiscal policy, and people can go and earn money in that and take that out into the real world, that's pretty cool. And I think that's where we're headed. And so I think that there needs to be some sort of a hybrid approach, and usually when I'm advising games, I'm saying I think what Star Atlas wants to do is a little bit crazy and ambitious, as far as every single thing happening on chain. I don't think that necessarily needs to happen. But I do think that it adds an extra layer of reality and interest that can really make things interesting when values become real within a game, and money just doesn't go in, but also can come out of a game, and that hasn't been possible before.
But let's go with Joe next. And before that, Joe, I didn't want to piggyback up top off of Kyle's back and just say something. So I think that currently, yes, Web3 gaming doesn't work, and potentially with the rise of, and I do believe in a more hybrid model as Kyle was articulating there, but eventually with the rise of layer twos, and I think we can talk about that in a bit later as another potential catalyst, right? When you are playing a Web3 game without realizing it's a Web3 game, and this is another drive for mainstream adoption, when you're interacting with the blockchain without actually recognizing that you're doing so and going through all the tedious tasks, that is when you would see the true power. And so why, Joe asks, what incentive does a gaming studio have to even do this? And I guess one of the arguments I would make, again, reverting back to my World of Warcraft analogy, is currently there's a huge market for people in developing countries that farm gold and they sell it on the black market. Why not, for example, have an NFT marketplace where people farming gold can sell it on the NFT marketplace, and the studio or the builders, whoever it is, Activision, for example, is taking a percentage cut of all those transactions. Same with asset ownership. If you have a Sulfur S dating back to 2005 and it sells for $1 million on an NFT marketplace, well, 5% of that transaction is a big amount of money. So that's the argument I'd make, and I'd pass the mic to Joe from here. Sorry about that, Joe.
Sorry, can
no worries. Oh, go ahead.
If I can, just real quickly, just contest the need for layer two in a way. Like, I think that people have been massively overlooking what you can do when you have your own blockchain, for example. And something that we've been working on for over a year is a layer one protocol, in the Polkadot network, where we're building components that developers or game developers, for example, can subsidize the gas costs for the end user. So the end user doesn't even feel or ever have to even think about things like gas, right? Because that's horrible. So, like the last thing that gamers want to do is think about how much gas I'm paying on a transaction when I'm doing something on chain. So things like this are possible in the future. And in fact, what we're building, Hero, the whole entire, and this is it's quite fitting for this title of this Spaces with Pillars of Adoption, is my belief is that we need Web3 to feel a whole lot less like Web3 and have it feel a whole lot more like Web2. And we can do that, right? You can do that. And for games, for example, there's a lot of the gaming. Someone earlier said, I forget who it was. Someone said there's $50 billion a year in game revenue. Well, that's fine. Like, these guys can continue to bill traditionally because gamers don't want to switch over and be forced into crypto. So there's plenty of on-ramps. There's decentralized on-ramps that are coming on too, which are even better. But you can continue to generate revenue in traditional ways, and then subsidize the gas costs for your end user so they don't feel it, right? And this is something like that we're building. And I think this has to happen across the board for everything if we really want to expect adoption to happen on a massive level, because things like bridges and gas and a lot of Web3 is way too complex for most people to use today.
Joe.
Thanks, yeah, the two things I was going to jump on and talk about were basically points already that were made for me. Number one being, the one thing I would do want to mention, though, the gaming industry and the cryptocurrency / blockchain industries have been inextricably tied together for, years now. Obviously in the early days of crypto, a lot of crypto was being used by gamers and discussed on gaming platforms, whether it was Discord, Slack, or, other communities such as that. I mean, you had your 4chans, you had your communities like that as well, that were inextricably tied with gaming communities. So I think it's very important to note that and recognize that blockchain has really an immutable place in the gaming community and with Web3 gaming. Now, in terms of the hybrid model, I think Kyle and you also addressed that perfectly. And I was going to add a little bit to that, but kind of took the words out of my mouth there a little bit. But I do think that the hybrid model needs to be in play, right? We have our base level, our baseline for gaming, where fiat on-ramps, off-ramps for gaming purchasing and in-app purchase and in-store purchases are working just fine. But if we add another layer, which is what we're doing with blockchain and with crypto type bridging and payments, and obviously Polkadot's doing a good job with the low to no gas fee type implementation. I believe XRP and that kind of payment settlement will also work in the future, and Hedera, HBAR, all those guys. But adding that in just gives people another option, right? And people love options and choices. And that's something that we have to be very cognizant of as we build out Web3 and build out the gaming section and real world asset type purchasing and selling section of Web3. We can't have these isolated communities where you can only mint and purchase an NFT or store it on one storefront, right? We have to have it cross-chain. We have to have it multi-chain. We have to have it multi-storefront. And we, each storefront can have their own, their own fees and their own implementations, whether it's a 2%, 3%, 4% mint fee or royalties or whatever they want. But if it's not more unified, where these things can be easily, moved cross-chain or to other wallets and into other storefronts and infrastructures and ecosystems, we're still failing there, and we haven't met the bar that needs to be met for that easy transition for the general community and mass adoption of Web3.
Andrew, you had your hand up, but I'm assuming your point might have already been taken.
My point similar to Joe was covered mostly. I do have one quick statement though I would like to make, if that's okay. Asking XYZ team, XY community to build a play to earn game is obviously a huge task. I feel like most games are not going to be developed within the next 3, 4, 5 years. Could take even possibly longer for something that's more efficient compared to what we have today. I feel like more capital also must come in within the space. I mean, because we know building a game isn't very cheap, as I said. And the problem with the game is that the proof of concept can only take place once that game is already being built. So if XYZ team does create a game and use all the capital and the game doesn't really work and it's not really marketable or attractive, it almost becomes a nuisance in a sense. And I believe that Kyle also stated this as well, is that regarding, or maybe it was Joseph actually, regarding the fact that
I think we might have lost Andrew there. I see Joe Hall with his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I've just realized we have two Joes up here, so I will refer to Joseph as the other Joe for the time being. And sorry, I tried to talk over you there, Joseph, my bad. But it was just a sort of general point about we live and work in a space where these buzzwords are thrust upon us, and we're supposed to just sort of go with it and be like, okay, this is the next big thing, let's keep talking about it. But if we just take a step back and look at play to earn, I mean, I sometimes really struggle with the idea that I should be playing to earn. Why can't I just play to play? I know there's obviously money to be made, and we live in a capitalist society, but I feel like the joy of just playing a game has kind of gone out the window with this introduction and discussion around Web3. And it's just something that I have a bit of trouble with. I wanted to throw into the spaces and be like, why should I be earning from playing?
I can go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right when it comes down to like the idea of like play to earn, or even just the whole earn word. But let's be real here though. Like if you're playing poker and there's no money on the line, it's not very interesting, right? Like, but this or you're betting somebody just for betting somebody who's going to win this game. Like if there's no money on the line, it doesn't really get your adrenaline pumping, right? But when you got stake in something, it becomes a whole new level of interest. And I think,
but that's gambling. That's not play to earn. That's gambling. I mean, we all know that gambling is a big adrenaline thing. But gambling.
Well, yes. It is gambling, but there's also. I mean, it's also like I guess you could say that like, well, yeah, it's also skill. Right?
Kyle, I believe you cut out there the last second. It might be me again, but I believe it cut out.
Skill-based gambling, I would say, like right, because this is like
so is poker skill-based
gambling. Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right, and so is crypto, right? Crypto's gambling. like this whole market, like it's always this whole world is about assets, right, on the line. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
I do believe.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I do believe there is an element of play to earn, though, in traditional games. It's just positioned a slightly different way. I think, from my perspective, I think there needs to be a repositioning from play to earn, where you're actually just earning a token or something like that, and more play to earn where you're earning things in the game that you can utilize in other games, that you can own as a player in the game, like we were discussing before, like skins, abilities, all of these other things that you could sort of think about as play to earn. But right now, my perspective is play to earn has sort of earned a bad reputation of shitty games just earning some token that you don't really want to actually even own. Whereas if it's repositioned to play to earn, where you're earning things that you can actually own in the game and use towards bettering yourself in the game, I think that's a very powerful element of games, and many, many games have that sort of dynamic.
I guess I want to piggyback off what Michael was saying, and then I'm going to get to Peter and Andrew. And I completely agree with you, Joe. I don't like the name play to earn, and I don't think that people should be playing a game to earn, which is why I always kind of preface this debate with the game has to be good. People need to want to play it because they enjoy it. There needs to be a robust ecosystem. There needs to be incentives to keep players integrated in that, or rather retain players in that ecosystem. The novelty of owning an item that was minted back in 2005, or the ability to sell gold, for example, or sell a utility token on an NFT marketplace to another player who might not have enough time to farm that, is icing on the cake. I think those, as Michael and Kyle were saying, those ecosystems already exist. Why not create a more efficient infrastructure using blockchain technology? But I would love to hear, again, any pushback on that. Peter and Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, play to earn kind of mystifies me. Video games are fun, but they bring no value to society just by playing, so why should I be paid for it? If I enjoy it, that should be enough, in my view. And so if I am getting paid in anything other than in-game bonuses, then that money has to come from somewhere. So who is that coming from? Is that coming from less zealous players of that video game who just like kind of ape in and out and don't play enough? And then does that incentivize me to just sit on the metaverse like for 19 hours a day? That sounds depressing as fuck.
But
So,
Peter,
like,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to push back, but like that's already happening. There are people that already spend most of their time, and whether I don't know how they're making money or how they're kind of supplementing their real life. They spend most of their time in these worlds, and they end up selling whatever they accrue in a metaverse type world like Forte, like World of Warcraft, to folks that might work, I don't know, 10 hours a day and not have time, but still want to be engaged and involved in that ecosystem. It's already happening.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense in a sense. Like if you have enough time to accrue all those elements of the game that more casual players are willing to pay you for, that's fine. But if it's just like log X hours, get Y dollars, like where is that external value coming from? And so if we're talking about the pillars of adoption, I think the central pillar for most people in this space who are aping in and out of NFTs and chanting about how rich we're going to be is to start looking serious and start like reading about economics and how it works. Because until then, like if we want these kinds of systems to be adopted, we have to look like serious people. And if we don't look like serious people, like Activision is just going to plow through everybody else, and we're going to, whether they use the blockchain or not, it'll still be super centralized, and they're going to take all of our money. So if we as a community want to be taken seriously in whether it's the video game space or digital art or tokenized assets, the chief pillar adoption for us is to look kind of serious rather than say weird shit.
Andrew, and then I'll move on to the next topic.
No, before I continue, can you guys hear me properly this time?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So, Kyle, my question is kind of directed at you. So you mentioned there's a revenue stream within play-to-earn games. What percentage of that revenue model goes to percentage of XYZ players within a game?
Can you phrase? I mean,
yeah,
all economies are different, right?
Well, essentially, it's my belief. Correct me if I'm wrong. But only the top 5%, top 10, top 5% of each game or XYZ game play to earn players actually make revenue. So how is that really enticing to the rest of the 95, 80%, 90% of people? In my opinion, in my personal opinion, it's not. it's not enticing enough, and that only 5% and 10% actually gain revenue from that said game. And to really back up Peter here, people are just XYZ game just wasting time, not really being really beneficial.
Oh, we're talking like this is like what you're bringing up is really old. Like you're talking about like Axie and Peg Axie and these old shitty like really broken models. But like I don't think we've seen a really good game with a good token economy yet. I know that we're advising some of them, right? And working on working this out. But like these guys didn't put any effort into their token economies. Like and so yeah, you're right. But yeah, that you're giving examples of like very old stuff, right? So let's this is obviously has already been proven to not work.
But yeah, so again, like if it's all about like people who are buying and selling and trading various assets within a game that makes them happy, and if there's like a crummy house in the metaverse that some person wants to live in for 18 hours and they want to spend 3 Ethereum on it, that's fine. I got no objection there. I guess just to clarify my point, the only thing I'm talking about is just like play X hours, earn Y dollars, whatever currency it's in. I'm not sure how that's sustainable, because then if someone's playing to earn just in external dollar value, there has to be someone who's paying to play.
I think we should move past this idea of this whole entire conversation seems irrelevant when we're talking about play to earn. I think we've already established that model is a Ponzi, and like this is not sustainable.
Dope. Yeah, then I'm with you 100%.
Nice. So well, that's not going to be a pillar of adoption. What's the next one?
I think we all found there's an overlap in what we agree in, and I think we all agree that the current the current play to earn model is just like Kyle said, it's a Ponzi, and I don't disagree with that at all. I wanted to move on to Andrew brought this up before, and I've thought about it a lot. We had Mandela-Fi here. Taking kind of first steps to 3-step DeFi yield farming. But on a more macro level, Web3 onboarding needs to be more seamless. And I mean, I reached out to Michael from Shrimpy because and Michael, I don't mean to misquote you, but correct me if I'm wrong, but Michael seems to argue that the future of mass adoption and investing will be through super centralized platforms, right? Grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, they need to be able to interact with this stuff and invest in this stuff without going through the tedious steps that we've kind of geeked out and figured out on our own. Michael, I will let you kind of take the mic from here and explain more in detail what you mean. But I do believe that that's the next big flood of money needs to come from investors that don't go through this tedious process of wallet creation and most people don't want to control their own private keys. Most people don't want to be responsible for their own assets. So yeah, give it to you, Michael.
Yeah. To provide a little bit more context, my beliefs are that, like has been sort of suggested in this discussion, most retail customers do not care. They don't care about decentralization. They don't care about managing their own assets. They don't care about custody. They don't care about any of this stuff. They just want a very simple product that does what it's supposed to do. And it's very similar to the behaviors that we saw in the internet. So in the early days, people who used the internet were very technical. They understood how the internet worked. They interfaced directly with protocols to communicate with other people on the internet. Everybody sort of understood all of these very technical things. But over time, the internet became more centralized. Fewer people understood these technical things. People didn't actually become more technical. They became less technical. And now today, 99% of people don't understand how the internet works. They don't want to understand how the internet works. They just want to be able to load their Netflix, stream their service, get access to their whatever it is. And I believe the digital asset market's going to go the same way. So we're going to see a rise of centralized services. We're going to see a move away from decentralized services. And we're going to see DeFi being more relevant for developers. So a protocol will be less about retail investors and more about how can I use this protocol as a developer to build tools on top of it. So I think for the next wave of adoption will be through these centralized services. And honestly, my opinion, we should just sort of redefine DeFi as developer finance rather than decentralized finance. So potentially some controversial opinions there, but happy to hear what you guys think.
Joseph and then Kyle.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, actually, quite a bit. We all know from a little bit of my background, if you don't know, I'm a regulatory and compliance lawyer. So I assist and advise on legislation in the U.S. and sometimes abroad as well. And I definitely see the way this wave of regulation and regulatory initiatives aimed at decentralized finance and decentralized ecosystems in general. And I've been preaching for the last few months because I know it's coming down the line. The next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see our KYC, AML, our infrastructure, fundamentally change in decentralized ecosystems and DeFi ecosystems. There's not going to be the same level of privacy that there is right now. So enjoy it while it lasts, really. But I think you're right. A lot of DeFi and decentralized ecosystems are going to be used by users that, like you equated to internet users today, do not care about the protocols behind them so long as they feel at least reasonably secure and are able to transact simply, right? As Noah mentioned, we are working on a DeFi ecosystem with our centralized exchange to build out the DeFi side of it and decentralized side. That is all about ease of access and ease of usability for even your novice crypto user. And I think that's the most important thing to focus on for adoption, really, and of course for Web3. Now, you're also going to see, like you said, a lot of these protocols are for development type tools. I think you're right. And you're going to see a lot of these, meme type tokens and these derivatives of derivatives type tokens that are just, basically a side chain of a side chain go away because people are going to, wise up and learn a little bit about that and about what to and what not to put their money into, what protocols and what projects. But at the same time, you're going to see that with tightening of regulation, just like you saw after the 2017 bull run where there were a bunch of scam ICOs, you're going to see them clamp down on decentralized and DeFi type projects that are scammy or Ponzi scheme in nature. And we're going to see a lot of that clean up and go away as well. So I think there's a lot of validity to what you said.
I would like to take a very, very, very different approach. I think that people will learn their lessons with centralized custodians until they lose all their money, until the Celsiuses, the 3ACs, the Voyagers, all these things are happening. When you start losing your shirt, the freeways, when everyone starts losing their money in centralized custodianships, they're going to sooner or later learn that you probably shouldn't do that because they don't have your best interests at heart. And when you can start trusting blockchain, permissionless, decentralized stuff, what it's going to take is for people to build really grandma-friendly applications. And I know people are building wallets right now that aren't hard to set up, that don't require you to write down your seed phrase, and that you can do you can restore from friends and things like that. I think that we're missing the point, and it seems like a lot of the conversation seems to be pointed at like very privileged Western folks, but we're forgetting about the rest of the world, who isn't a privileged Western folk who lives in a world where they have to abide by regulation. So I think that what we're going to see is access open up to really cool opportunities to people who are sticking to crypto ideals, really decentralization kind of ideals, permissionless, trustless, censorship resistant, KYC free types of opportunities, right? And like these things will live on decentralized servers, on decentralized networks, permissionless access to blockchains through things like Pocket Network and Web3 Wallet, which is building out decentralized access, right? So regulators will try to regulate and clamp down, but you're avoiding a huge portion of the world when we think about like the privileged people who are fortunate enough to be living in societies where like you have bank accounts and things like that, right? But for most of these people, like you're forgetting what the whole purpose of like what blockchain and crypto was made for in the first place. So anyway, I don't know. What's going to happen is people are currently right now building tools to make things easier for the average person to implement. Like for example, like, you know, Commonwealth right now is building something that will allow your average housewife, you know, who doesn't know anything about cryptocurrency, to go invest into a fund, and that fund will get access to private sales and all kinds of really good deals and good opportunities. And so, and then I know different wallets, like Interstellar, for example, who's building a wallet which is going to be really, really easy to set up, like PayPal, for example. And I know decentralized on and off ramps, like projects like Axon, for example, who are building decentralized on and off ramps that will allow us to bypass centralized kind of parties. I think that if you look at also really nice, like look at GMX for example, like it's a much better decentralized leverage exchange. You don't have to. First of all the value that's being accrued within the ecosystem goes back to the token holders. Far superior to Bybit, Deribit, Binance, any centralized exchange that just extracts value from everybody. Oh, sorry, you got liquidated. Goodbye. We're taking that money for a few people in the world. Again, it's a centralized for-profit entity that's just siphoning value from all the retail. At least GMX has a closed loop circular token economy where the liquidity providers, who people are putting up the capital for this thing to operate, they're getting 70% of all the revenue. The other 30% of the revenue goes to the people who are staking the governance token that can control the protocol. Like, this is a far superior version, right? And you don't have to put your money on a centralized exchange where it's likely going to get hacked one day or stolen. So yeah, anyway, you can custody your own assets, and when you want to trade on the exchange, you just connect your wallet. It's way better, and the user experience feels exactly like a centralized exchange.
Let's go Joe Hall, Peter, and Michael.
Thanks. Well, sorry, Noah, even, and thanks, Carl. I made a few notes here because, firstly, one thing that Michael said really resonated. I actually quite like that rebrand from decentralized finance to developer finance, because at least that way, you know, we're acknowledging that everything in this space is centralized and company created or company driven. Because ultimately, when we talk about crypto, you know, we brag about things being immutable. They are mutable. Everything in this cycle has been switched on and off, or has been hard forked, or whatever. So I quite like that idea that we go from decentralized to developer finance. And then regarding what Kyle was just saying about ease of use or letting your grandma use it, I think that's really important. I think, for example, with the Lightning Network, you need to know that you're using it without realizing that you're using it. I think that will definitely be the next big step. Sorry if you can hear the shouting in the street below me. And the other thing was just a little bit of a niggle, but this movement, what are we going to call it, whether it's crypto or DeFi, it wasn't spawned from this idea of tokenization or assets. It was born from the cypherpunks, and the idea was to establish peer-to-peer cash. So, you know, let's not forget the origins, let's not forget the movement and the idea behind it, which was to experiment with a better money than what we currently have, which is dollars, euros, and that's obviously something we can all get behind. Wherever you are in the world, the money is broken, and that's what Bitcoin is trying to fix. So yeah, that's me.
Peter?
Hey, yeah, I'm going to say something. I don't know if anybody in this room will agree. I don't think ease of use matters. You know, what's going to drive adoption is the essentiality of the technology. You know, the internet was still kind of hard to figure out, and still is in a way for grandma, but you need it. You need to have an email address to get a job. You need these things, and whether it's easy or hard, like, people come along wherever they are, you know, in the developing world, the developed world alike. Like, an essential technology is essential. And most of the centralized entities working up ease of use technology is going to fall victim to the same kind of tribalization. Like, oh, we're doing it better over here on the Polygon network. And, oh, these guys have this going on. And it's going to be a big old fight. And it's going to be the same thing about people hollering about how easy their shit is to use. Until it becomes essential, no one's going to care. And once it does become essential, people will learn right quick how to use it, in my view. So I don't know. I mean, it would be nice to be easy, but, you know, I think it's pretty easy already. I know maybe I have certain advantages, but I think it doesn't take much longer than an hour or two to figure out how to get some Bitcoin and send it around.
I'm going to move to Michael because I'm sure he has a lot to say. But Peter, I will say on one point on that is I can foresee your vision becoming a reality as the Gen Zs and the generation younger than the Gen Zs grow up and turn into adults. And like you said, it takes time, but our generation figured it out, or at least a small minority of us did. And probably the next generation, a bigger percentage of them will have an easier time navigating through this technology. But Michael, mic's yours.
Yeah, so to start off, I would like to clarify that my position isn't based on what I want to happen. My position is based on what I think will happen based on customer and consumer behaviors. And I think what we've seen from consumer behavior is that, Kyle, you listed all of these things that are better about decentralized services. And I agree that they're better. But my position is that consumers don't care. There's things that are built every day that are better than other things, but customers still don't use them because, the marketing isn't right, the branding isn't right, the team that's building it, runs out of money. Like there's so many reasons that people don't stick to products that are better. And I think what we're going to realize, and a lot of teams in the space are going to realize, is that just because they make something better does not mean they will be successful. So it doesn't matter if it's decentralized. It doesn't matter if you get your own custody. Customers will still keep their same customer behaviors, which are sort of more aligned with like Web 2. And that's kind of my view on the market. And another point that I guess I would make is that there's a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines. In fact, I would say more people are sitting on the sidelines right now who are scared than there are people in the crypto space altogether. So there's all of these people who are scared to get into the crypto space because they know if they put their money in and they lose their money, they won't have anybody to blame. They won't have anybody, like their bank, they can't get it insured, they can't get their money back. There's nothing they could do. So if they put their money into a decentralized protocol, they're scared to do that because they can't get that money back, or they're scared that they're going to lose their money, and they have no course of action. They have no responsible person that they could talk to. And I think that's one of the problems with decentralized services is that you can't just call someone on the phone and have the issue resolved. So you need centralized services who can provide those services, provide customer support, provide insurance, provide, all of these things that are going to be very difficult with decentralized services. And certainly, maybe somebody will figure it out in a decentralized way that makes sense and it, offers the same experience to customers. But I think there's far more concern than people think in terms of customer behavior and how people think about the world. And it's not going to be very easy to shift those behaviors. So anyways, that's sort of some additional thoughts.
Joseph.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Michael. I was going to kind of talk along those same lines as well. There's a couple things that we cannot forget when it comes to decentralized protocols, and especially decentralized on and off ramps, as you referred to earlier. That being regulation and sufficient liquidity. The regulatory process is going to be like I discussed before. There's going to be even if it is decentralized, there's going to be a KYC AML process, especially for off ramps, because you are changing back to fiat and or some kind of fiat equivalent. And so long as that's defined as currency, there's not going to be an end around, right, for cashing out. There just isn't. They're not, traditional fiat systems are not going to allow for that. In terms of liquidity, there's got to be a ton of liquidity provided on both the fiat and the crypto side if you're going to make a decentralized off-ramp work as well and have a successful protocol that can actually be used by, millions of people, if not billions someday, right? There's got to be astronomical amounts of money backing it with all kinds of different legal tender on the fiat side, as well as, our cryptos. So those are just a couple of challenges there. But I do think that, you're right about people being scared with their decentralized protocols. It's not like being on a centralized exchange like a Binance or Binance equivalent. Our exchange, for example, which is a Binance Cloud, independently owned product, but is insured by the Binance, fund. So insurance fund. So if something does get hacked, your crypto is insured. They're not every exchange is built that way, right? And there are some, especially in DeFi protocols, there is none of that insurance. So in a sense, people, you're right, they might not use the best product, but they might use a more centralized product or some kind of hybrid that they're familiar with, they're comfortable with, and they know to at least some level they have a modicum of safety. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, it's 100% safe. We all know that, but these are things that we have to take into account when we push decentralization. And of course, the final thing is, like some people say here, education, right? Your average user doesn't know what the heck they're investing in or how these protocols work. And even if they don't care how, there needs to be some level of broken down, how the protocols work and how like an AMM works, things like that, just so people can understand it and feel comfortable with it before diving into DeFi or decentralized ecosystems, or else we're never going to have mass adoption with it, because people, like you said, will be too scared and will continue to sit on the sidelines, because especially with the news sensationalizing hacks that are relatively small, or liquidity pool drains that are relatively small in the overall picture of what DeFi and decentralization represents in this industry.
Andrew.
Just a super, super quick point on my end here. I would like to preface, really quickly that right now, as it currently stands, only 63% of the world currently use the internet, let alone what it was 10, 15 years ago, probably a lot less. For the entirety of the space to become successful and this technology to be used, we don't need 100% full adoption. We could probably do very well with 30, 40, 50%, even a little bit more. So I think we're on the right track, though. I would also say as well, I can only speak for what I've done myself and how I've kind of navigated myself without knowing I've actually been navigating through the space. I often refer to NBA Top Shot. When I spoke about this recently, actually, in the sense that I was registered on the platform about a couple of years ago now, probably in September, either last year or the year before, and I was purchasing quote-unquote NFTs, quote-unquote digital collectibles, as Reddit kind of formed it, without even knowing I was navigating within crypto, within the blockchain itself. So at that point, when that becomes super, super prevalent in the sense that everyone's doing that way, that's when adoption will be fully reached, or to capacity it's going to be reached at.
So I was having coffee with Daniel Killeen, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, of Avalanche, and I was discussing this topic with him, and he brought up the notion that stablecoin and asset adoption, stablecoin and peg assets on the blockchain will probably be the next big wave of money flowing into the space. So not just the US dollar, but other stable currencies around the globe, and decentralized Forex platforms would probably be a big hype niche in the industry coming up in the next 1 or 2 years. I'd be curious to know if the panel has any opinions on that, and then we can move on to the next topic. Joe.
Yeah, really quickly. I 100% agree on that. I think, that's obviously what NFTs were developed to represent, right? The tie into real world asset ownership is, of course, very important, and we see it with commodities, we see it with houses, luxury goods. I mean, across the board. But I definitely think that's going to be the next wave, and platforms that bring it to their user bases and to your traditional maybe options or commodities or currency, traders are going to be industry leaders in this next wave, because it's going to be that combination of ease of use plus ability to, I should say, ecosystems or protocols, really, if we're talking decentralized. But that is going to absolutely revolutionize our industry and bring a ton of visibility to, and competition to regular Forex trading markets that, of course, aren't 24/7 and have close and open times and things of that nature.
Can I throw another one out there?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, wherever we are in our respective territories around the world, I'm sure we've all seen some horrible inflation numbers this year. So I think another great big pillar of Bitcoin adoption is going to be, well, the realization that the money's knackered and we need a new one. And I think within that, the best marketing team for this is going to be people like Jerome Powell, people like your central bankers, wherever you are in your respective geographies. So I think that it was sort of tying into what Peter was saying earlier. But we don't necessarily need these tools or these amazing products, whatever it may be, because we've already got horrific management structures in place, which have just made an absolute dog's dinner of the money that we all have to use on a day-to-day basis.
So, by the way, any community members that want to come up to the panel and share their insights, you're more than welcome to. Just request, and I can bring you up. I saw El Sultan with his hand up, so if you have something to say, man, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Well. Hi, everybody. I guess that my quick 2 cents, I'm totally aligned, by the way, on the stable coins topic, especially coming from Venezuela and having lived double-digit inflation all of my life, all the way to high inflation to hyperinflation. You saw a huge wave of adoption of Bitcoin before stablecoins came into the scene. But now what you see today, for example, in countries like Venezuela and Argentina, it's like fourfold the adoption of stablecoins when you compare it to Bitcoin. So I do see, like, especially like in emerging markets, stablecoins are a big deal. Because, like, to give you an example, it's between 4 to 8% that Venezuelans, all Venezuelans, out of all Venezuelans, 4 to 8% own a bank account outside of the country. If you don't, you're fucked. If you haven't adopted crypto, you're screwed. So before crypto, before stablecoins, before Bitcoin, before all of this, you had to literally fly yourself to either Panama or the Cayman Islands or the US or whatever, and have like a relative in the US and use his address to open a bank account in the US just to have like a stabler form of currency. This, like, in a nutshell, these markets, what people crave for in them, it's basically dollars. It's not Bitcoin right away, but I do see like stable coins paving the way for like an initial wave of adoption for crypto, and then people like, oh, okay, there's like this like more scarce asset that is Bitcoin, that I can invest a part of my savings in it for the long term and stuff. Just my quick 2 cents on that.
Wait, so El Sultan, can I just jump in there quickly? Would you say that stablecoins to some extent is a threat to Bitcoin adoption worldwide?
I wouldn't say that, because I'm biased, but I have the perception that stablecoins will run on Lightning Network rails, and I think that it's actually the ultimate use case for like stablecoins, because finally the dollar will have real-time settlement with no fees globally, right? No matter where you live, you'll be able to have a dollar account on your phone without having to. That it's not tied to any jurisdiction, basically. That's again, I'm biased, but that's how I see it.
Don't forget the dollar is inflating, by 10-15% a year right now. Also,
Yep.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks. Those are great points, Sultan, and it made me kind of think about kind of maybe resetting the room. Like when we talk about adoption, what are we thinking is getting adopted here? There are a few things I'm confident will be adopted. One is Bitcoin, and one is simply the idea of self-custody. But when we look at, like, when we say, okay, mass adoption is coming, that doesn't mean everybody's NFT is going to go to the moon and every project is going to do well. You still have to make reasonable choices, and you still have to think about the reasons the world is going the way it is. And so in terms of cross-border settlements and durable money, Bitcoin is already well on its way. And self-custody will be fine because that won't go out of style. Grandma likes to keep her money under her mattress. Soon enough, her mattress will be on her phone, and that's fine. But so think carefully, everybody, about what you're actually thinking might be adopted here. There's no guarantees. Like Ethereum doesn't have to survive. So Web3 could be adopted by 100% of the world, and all of our bags could still be worthless as currently constituted. So be careful out there, everybody.
I think that just to add to build on that, 87% of the world currently lives under an authoritarian regime, right? I'm one of those that comes from that side of the world. So it's like, again, massive social programs, massive restrictions, contra currency exchange rates, yada, yada, yada. And that leads to first like a stabler form of currency like the dollar, etc. And then eventually like, oh, I need to invest my money because this is also inflating. What can I invest in with this form of money that I now adopted?
El Sultan, let me ask you this. What percentage, if you had to ballpark, what percentage of, I guess you left the panel, maybe you got DC'd. I was going to ask you what percentage of Venezuelans and Argentinians are actually able to get stablecoin exposure. I'd be interested to know that statistic. Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, if I may know really quickly. Peter, I do have a question for you. We've spoken about this before. Maybe we can bring some light to it again. Regardless of the panels or the listeners' positions on CBDCs, do you feel like that's a good thing for adoption or a negative thing for adoption, regardless on your outtake of how they're going to perform?
A good thing for adoption. Well, it would seem to be, if the goal is simply to have everybody comfortable with the tech, that would be a good thing. But if you're philosophically opposed to the government being able to track adoption itself would continue like a freight train, but it might be bad adoption, if that makes sense. Like adoption itself isn't automatically good. I think Joe Hall, I think you probably have a really more nuanced take.
No, not at all. Not nuanced. I was just going to bring up a recent example. So, the Naira in Nigeria. I spent a lot of time bouncing around African countries, specifically sub-Saharan Africa, because I feel like that's where we're really going to see the takeoff in Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. And Naira was talked about in like 2018, 2019, finally rolled out last year, and they've seen 0.5% pick up from people, whereas people are much quicker to come towards Bitcoin, because ultimately a CBDC is a central bank digital currencies. And if we're talking about the emerging world or the global south, then the average age is in the early 20s or even late teens. So, young people aren't really going to trust a central bank over a decentralized digital currency. So I think that, but to the point about, is it a good thing for adoption? I want to say no, but it's true. You could argue the case that because it's digital money, and no, not even that, because a lot of the money that we use nowadays is digital money. So the CBDC case is just another flavor of fiat money, but a digital version. So I don't know where I stand on that, actually.
Yeah, I think the thing that gets people nervous about CBDCs is once money goes into your wallet, like everybody will know whose money it is, and there's no anonymity. I think that cat may already be out of the bag. If people can just figure out where I've KYC'd, that's where all of my money comes from. That's where all my DeFi investments come from. So I agree. Like CBDCs are just another form of fiat. Just because they're digital doesn't mean they're not like made by order of government. So I don't know if they change all that much, to be honest.
Peter, I would assume as well you're on the same stance of allowing, I guess, XYZ Bank to have self-custody over your assets, and as well, I would agree your stance is very similar. Joe, as well?
What was
allowing
the question, sorry?
A bank to have custody.
Yep, you got it.
I think that let me see if I understand it. So we get the benefits of self-custody, but we designate a third party to be the one as the custodian. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, essentially, it's more of a quote-unquote insurance policy.
Right. Yeah, I think that there is a future for that. I think there's going to be an appetite for people that like the technology and appreciate that there may be higher yields if you can do self-custody, but then maybe with just a vetted way of holding on to it. This brings me back to the point I wanted to address previously, and then I have to go, unfortunately. But there's this idea that people appreciate banks because if you get a fraudulent transaction or if your money is stolen, they will restore that money. And that's true. And I think that is some of the appetite for centralized institutions. However, I bet you, and I don't have the numbers and I don't know how to research this, and I hope someone writes some scholarship on it. But, when you add up all the money and all the value that centralized institutions are able to extract from us, it's no wonder that they can afford to reimburse us for fraudulent transactions. And it's no wonder that they can afford to replace money that's stolen. Where is all that money coming from? It's coming from us in the first place. So, the appetite comes from our own money. So to the extent we can engage in this culture shift where we realize, well, yes, hacks will happen. And yes, like all this stuff is dangerous. But at the end of the day, the opportunities and the yields that are available thanks to self-custody and thanks to Web3 are so much preferred to the centralized system. Maybe we can kind of get into the system where, hacks are not tolerated, but also understood as a price of doing business. And then we can move towards this culture where people take self-custody more seriously and put in place like XYZ locks, revoke your permissions, all the rest of it. So we'll see. That's very much yet to be discussed and yet to be determined. But I'm interested in it and keeping my eye on it. And thanks, Noah, and everybody for a great panel. I got to go.
Thank you, Peter. Always going out with a bang. Appreciate you being on here. Robert, I saw that you had your hand up. Welcome to the panel.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I just wanted to come back to what you guys are saying about CBDCs or central bank digital currencies. I've always been of the impression that I've always been quite confident that naturally, because of the nature of this technology, it would do what it needs to do over time. And it would naturally just grow to be the sort of the predominant thing that decentralized technologies would naturally just grow to do what they're supposed to do. But I've become more worried lately. Raoul Pal talks really well on this. Raoul Pal of Real Vision. He did a talk late last year about the threat of central bank digital currencies it's really about sort of behavioral economics. What they're going to try and do is have a situation whereby, for example, a grandmother who thinks that it's acceptable to, who spends too much time saving money is going to be automatically deducted, for example. They're going to be able to target economic policy in a way that we've never seen before and have more control than we've ever seen before. So I think that now more than ever, education is going to be important to make people understand what they're trying to do, and lots of people are trying to do it to educate people on what the government's trying to do with CBDCs. But I think now it's more important than ever to make people understand what this could mean, the dangers of these things, and what the alternative option is, which is Bitcoin and crypto and decentralized currencies and the freedom that it can give them. So I think that I think we need to be on guard now more than ever, basically.
Education, Robert. Thank you for that, and it kind of leads me into the next topic. I mean, we at Whale Coin Talk believe that education is a key catalyst to mainstream adoption. The right education, and that would probably look like this technology in this industry explained in layman's terms and for it to be easily accessible by the masses. I'm curious to know if the panel has any thoughts on how to best construct crypto education, blockchain education, and how to subsequently market it to the masses in a way that is not just easy for them to digest, but interesting for them to engage and be a part of. Joseph.
Sure. Education is vital in scaling up Web3 and really Web2 and getting blockchain and crypto in its current or future forms adopted. I think it's, as someone who teaches in undergraduate institutions as well as law schools and business schools on the graduate level, I think it's very important that we get everybody involved early and understanding, basically crypto and blockchain 101, get them comfortable with the concept, get them comfortable with the idea, and of course, make sure that our younger generations understand why it's important to use the existing infrastructure and stay on top of any, additions and like, to quote the title here, to any pillars that are going to, forward or hasten adoption. Now, for older, generations that may not be familiar with, like we were saying before, the internet or really the computerized age and digital age, we have to really scale it down and make it widely available, whether that's, delivering it to them in terms of half-hour segments or hour-long segments that they can sit down and just press play and learn through classes. I mean, a lot of platforms do this. Blockchain Academy's got some really good ones. There's a ton of other groups that do this as well. But I think it's important to make sure that if you are a project, that your community has access to this education, and it's important to spend some of your marketing dollars on making sure they understand not just why your product is the latest and greatest, but why the industry matters. It's something we take very seriously over at Mandala as well. We provide educational content for all of our users, whether they access it or not. It's always there for them, and we continue to work with outside educators to build more and more, not only video but audio content to understand what really crypto is, what Web3 is, and what blockchain is. So yeah, without that educational piece, mass adoption doesn't happen because people are daunted by the complexity of some of these things. One of the things I cringe at the most is when a white paper comes out and it's full of 30 pages of technical detail and mathematical equations, because you might have the best developers in the world and mathematicians that are putting these projects together and are developing these inflationary models or deflationary models, depending on what your token does, and all these staking and liquidity rewards and all these things. But if the average person doesn't understand it, they're not putting their hard-earned money into the project. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that speaking to the masses has to be coming from people that have more of the really marketing, traditional digital marketing, financial, and really public relations background, rather than a team of developers trying to implement their trying to explain their mathematical equations to a user base. So just my 2 cents on that.
Michael.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think there's a number of different ways that we can educate the public. And I think one of the first things that I think more people need to think about when they're engaging with the space is really having a strong message around what problem are we actually solving. I think there's a lot of concern from the, general population that they don't understand what problem the cryptocurrency space is solving, so they don't know why they would use it. So if they don't even know why they would use it, besides, of course, like gambling, making money, hoping for some miracle or something like that, then they're not going to use it. So for me, the first is the people in the space have to understand why they're doing what they're doing, besides gambling and stuff like that. And then they have to be able to message it in a very easy way. And I think people undervalue marketing. And I think there's a lot of products in the space who are marketing towards other people who are already in the space, but they're not marketing towards people who are outside the space. So, most of the websites that I look at when I'm looking at new products in the crypto space, they're marketing towards people who understand the product already. They already understand the technical details of DeFi and all of these very technical things. But that limits your audience to only people who are already inside the space, who already understand cryptocurrency, who already understand why they're using it. So I think marketing is another aspect where if we have a shift in the way that people market their products, we would be able to attract new people into the space who are looking for these types of products. And another unfortunate reality is that a lot of the culture shift to people onboarding into the digital asset space will happen just over time. It'll just sort of take time. And the way that we sort of saw the adoption of the internet was through a new generation of people who were willing to spend the time. They had friends that they were talking about the internet with at school. They engaged with it in computer classes or educational classes, and it was sort of they had exposure to it from when they were little and sort of grew up with the internet. So they understood how the technology worked. They were very comfortable with it. They were willing to invest time to better understand or, put together a computer or whatever it is. And I think the reality is a certain portion of the population will just never be interested in cryptocurrency unless it's forced upon them. And we're going to get wide adoption just sort of naturally over the generational churn of culture and people.
Robert, go ahead. Robert and then Joe Hall.
Yeah, I often say, education, not regulation. It's a lot of people would say that regulation is the thing that we need to get around in order to get adoption. During the Terra Luna sort of crisis, or during the boom of Terra, there were lots of very sleek fintech apps, fintech plays that were giving everyday people, once again, grandmothers and whatnot, access to this 20% yield. The thing they weren't doing, of course, was educating people on the risk of what they were doing. It's the reason why that crisis was so bad, because it wasn't just idiots like me, right? I'm an idiot. I'll sit up at 3 in the morning trading futures on Binance, on Binance, 10x leverage and whatnot. I deserve to lose money. These people who have been told by by a family member to jump onto this very sleek fintechy type app and get 20% yield on what they think is a stable coin, which can't go down, and then losing thousands, tens of thousands of dollars is a massive shame. So I think it's really about giving people access to these applications, these opportunities, but making sure that we don't sort of just constantly focus on growth and not think about the safety and security of others. So giving people access to these great opportunities, but making sure that we even force them in some instances through an educational program for at least, even if it's sort of 5 or 10 minutes. Hey, you need to read this, show that you've understood it in the same way that we do for private keys, right? Show that you've understood it, and then you can go ahead and get access to this amazing solution, which gives you yield and whatnot, but know the dangers. I think that's the killer thing to be doing.
Can I say one thing real quick about regulation? Is that I think that people are so used to thinking about legacy legacy systems where it was easy to regulate some sort of enterprise that was registered somewhere in a first world country, perhaps, where like if they were bad actors, it might be easy to go after them. However, in Web3 and blockchain and crypto, it's a global audience where people from all over the globe will be making applications that people from all over the globe will be using. And it's impossible, literally impossible, to regulate these guys, right? And it's impossible. Like it's like it's like when you got these old people in Congress who are saying, oh, I think we need to shut down Bitcoin or something like that. You just, you know, what you can regulate is enterprises that are getting in this space, big financial institutions. You can regulate that aspect, right? But you cannot, you simply will not ever be able to stop some developers in a garage somewhere in some country, right, that are creating a DeFi app that happens to gain traction. It's not possible. So everyone's delusional who thinks that you can rely on regulators to adopt the space. Absolutely delusional if you think that they're going to do jack diddly shit for regulation, for controlling the kind of things that happen in this space. It's absolutely ludicrous. And anyone who thinks that the regulation will actually help, you know, we need to self-regulate, meaning that we create standards in the industry that help prevent bad actors from acting bad. For example, I'll give you an example. I don't think that projects, teams should own the rights to their token contracts because they've proven time and time again that they abuse the privilege by changing vesting schedules, by selling their tokens and dumping on the public before they're supposed to be doing it, by not paying the advisors when they're supposed to be paying their advisors, or a million different things. Like if we just built a platform that controlled this in a decentralized way through some sort of governance mechanism, we would solve a tremendous amount of problems. Just do that. Right? It's a standard. And if this exists and everyone started using it and demanding that people use it, then all of these problems would go away, right? And if we started thinking about like locking liquidity as a kind of a standard, right? Why wouldn't you do that? Because that way you don't rug, for example. Like there's a bunch of things that we can do self-regulate. And I think that's what we need to focus on, education and self-regulation, but not, and when I mean self-regulation, that's the Bitcoin approach, right? It's the, hey, this thing exists. If you want to use it, we're here. We're not forcing you to, but if it becomes a standard that everyone uses and people don't use that, then people will look at these people as kind of shady and being like, why aren't you using these tools, right? Because if you're benevolent and you have good intentions, then you should be using these things that show transparency and make it much more difficult for you to become a malicious actor.
I was kind of following on from Kyle's point there, but yeah, there is, we've seen that with the fiat or the TradFi world with the phasing out of notes. You know, we're essentially being forced to adopt digital monies, right? You know, you go into lots of shops, cafes, bars, restaurants, all that sort of thing at the moment, and there'll be signs up saying we don't accept cash anymore. And initially it was introduced under the guise of COVID regulations because supposedly you can get COVID from notes or whatever. But now it's becoming the standard. You know, you have to pay in places for with card, you know, chip and pin or contactless. So I think there will become a situation where some countries, some governments, however authoritarian it is, you can be the judge, that they decide, okay, my people are going to have to adopt this CBDC. I mean, we saw that with El Salvador to an extent, right? The leader decided, I want my country to adopt Bitcoin and to set this example. And he basically said, you will adopt it and you will, you know, put the work in behind the scenes. And people went from knowing zero about Bitcoin one day to knowing very little about Bitcoin the following day, but knowing that it was in fact legal tender in their country. So I think, yeah, it's something definitely to be wary of. Whereas, you know, just to sum up, education is obviously really important, but we might have these tools forced upon us at some point, and that's something to be wary of.
Joseph.
Yeah, CBDCs, good segue there, considering India just launched its pilot program a day or two ago. And you want to talk about large swaths of the world being, you know, forced to use CBDCs. That's a perfect example because we know the digital rupee is going to be implemented by the Indian government sooner rather than later. In stark contrast to the way their banking system has dealt with crypto in the past. And of course, it's just, you know, things evolve and adapt, right? I do want to touch on Kyle's altruism there. I love it. I love that, you know, that bright and sunny view of the world with self-regulation being what it is. But this people are inherently, not all people, but enough people are inherently greedy and bad and can be malicious actors that there needs to be some sort of formalized regulatory framework and that regulators can follow, because whether we like it or not, they are the legislative and or governmental bodies that are in place to regulate asset classes. To say that a protocol cannot be possibly regulated is sure, maybe true in theory, but there are always ways to constrict it so that it won't be widely adopted, whether that is something that threatens current financial systems can be buried quite easily. Honestly, if governments really wanted to band together and destroy crypto and destroy the trend towards mass adoption, they could, and in some instances they have tried to, unsuccessfully, because many parts of the world embrace it. Most of the world embraces it, but you can impose restrictions that will frighten people enough away from using it as it currently stands. And you're right. There are easy safeguards against this. Here's another one. Why doesn't every team just dox themselves? If you're developing a protocol, what's wrong with people knowing who you are? Right? If you're not a malicious actor, what's the big deal?
Because they'll throw you in jail, just like they did for Tornado Cash. That's why.
But
Satoshi would if Satoshi is a benevolent, good actor, and he would also be executed or in jail or like in.
That's a pretty hard line. We don't even know who he or the group of people is, so that's kind of a speculative.
We know that we know that what was his name, Dorian or something. His house was raided back in 2017.
Correct.
Because they thought he was Satoshi. Sure, he would have been.
There are instances of that. That's correct. There are instances of that. However, as DeFi progresses, as Web3 progresses, people are not going to inherently trust people that have no level of visibility, and all they see is reporting of rug pulls from these teams and liquidity drains and things of that nature. So it's a balancing act, and it has to happen somewhere.
You don't have to trust. There's a whole point of crypto. It's not to trust people. You trust code, not people.
Sure, but that code is being manipulated time and time again in rug pulling schemes, and it's happened over and over and over. So where's the line drawn? I believe self-regulation is very important, but we don't have an infrastructure for that yet, do we? We've seen terrible actors that have drained this industry of billions of dollars. We saw it in different iterations, right? We've seen the Arthur Hayes of the world. We've seen the now we see DeFi protocols doing it. I mean, for every wave, there is new bad actors that pop up because people are inherently greedy and are inherently, not good actors. I mean, enough of them. There are plenty of people in this industry that are good actors, and I strongly believe that the vast majority are. But there has to be a level of safeguard for this adoption to happen, and it's not there yet. And if we don't bring regulatory bodies in, banks won't trust it. And this whole thing, it will stay marginalized, or at least relatively marginalized. So there's got to be some give and take. There can't just be a take by the Web3 industry and the decentralized industry. There's got to be some interplay, and there will be with regulatory bodies. Just my take on it.
I've got to jump off, guys, but I just want to say thank you very much for the lovely chat. And cheers to Noah for putting it all together. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining, Joe. It was a pleasure having you on. Michael, take it away.
Jump off in a minute as well. But I did just want to say, sort of in this discussion, I agree that there does need to be a balance. I think even though we don't like the idea that regulators will be involved in this space, that's simply just the reality. I don't think there's any, sort of possible future where that won't happen. And I think we've seen, even Kyle, you mentioned Tornado Cash. Tornado Cash is evidence of regulators have enough control over the space that they can shut down projects. They can make it so difficult to use. They can blacklist wallets. They can work with centralized institutions so that you can't withdraw your funds. There's so many things that they can do that they essentially can shut down the project. Obviously, they're not shutting down the code. They're not making the nodes go away, or whatever the infrastructure is. But people are going to be so scared to use it that it's essentially the same thing as shutting down the project. And one additional comment that I would have around anonymous teams is, I think we have I don't think we have enough conversations around what happens when governments get involved with cryptocurrency. And when I say involved, I mean being involved in a way that undermines the cryptocurrencies. If you don't know who's managing the project, if you don't know who's involved with the team, if you don't know any of those details, it could just be a government implementing these solutions or creating integrations with different protocols to, maximize the benefit of the government. And I think at this point, we haven't seen enough government involvement in different digital assets to really understand what that could look like. But I imagine there's going to be a future where governments fight over control over digital assets, not from a regulatory perspective, but from an actual developer on the ground implementing code perspective, like governments trying to control the network itself by developing features that align with them, all of these different things.
Like Lightning Network, for example.
Yeah. So, the government has a lot of control that we're not really talking about at this stage.
Yeah, like Lightning Network. For anyone who's listening to this that didn't get that comment, there was this whole debate back in the day, right? The block size debate, and then you had Blockstream, who was heavily supporting, who's vastly behind the Lightning Network, and they of course wanted to keep the blocks small. And they had, in my opinion, a bad excuse of the blocks being too big. But Bitcoin, it could have easily scaled by going bigger blocks, and we wouldn't have had to have a Lightning Network. Could have had cheap, fast transactions, on layer one, and there's a lot of speculation about, actually not even speculation. I think I don't know. I have to fact check myself here before I start saying false things, but pretty sure there's a lot of big money behind Lightning Network as far as why they want this thing to succeed and the control that you have over this fairly centralized type of layer 2 on top of Bitcoin.
So I think this is a good place to kind of wrap things up. We touched upon a number of potential catalysts. The next catalyst could be something none of us see as coming, right? It could blindside us, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is so innovative, paradigm shifting, so on and so forth." No one really knows. I want to thank all the panelists for coming on today. This is another episode of the Aquarium. We're going to be doing weekly debates, discussions on hot topics in the industry. I find these to be very informative for myself. I still consider myself an intermediate, and I'm learning every day as I go with respect to this industry and all that it has to offer. Again, thank you to the beloved panelists. Thank you for the audience. We're going to be doing another one of these next Wednesday, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. UTC. And tune in. If you want to come on the panel, message me. I'm going to reach out to you guys as well. But my name is Noah. Again, remember, this is Whale Coin Talks Aquarium, and we don't give any financial advice on here. There's nothing on this broadcast should be taken as financial advice. It's a Wild West industry still. Do your own research. Do your due diligence. Do your due diligence, and make sure you're investing in safe projects. So everyone have a great Wednesday, and I wish you all the best. Take care.